Hi, and welcome to another gathering on the 27th of February 2022. If you've been watching the news in the last couple of days, you'll have seen something very significant and scary: Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, which really is a question of kingdom, right? Who's going to rule? Who's got what land? What resources are theirs? And what do they demand of their people? Which really sheds light on today's reading as we read Mark chapter 3 and 4 in our desire to meet Jesus in Mark. And there again, we remember we're being asked to believe in Jesus, to have faith. And Jesus is saying, repent and turn, like change your life and be a part of my kingdom come. Well, what is his kingdom like? And what is Jesus like? Mark 4 particularly addresses this, where Jesus begins to teach in parables, or narratives, or short stories that demand our full engagement. They're not just intellectual stories, but they're stories that we get involved in and engaged in and begin to ask us to change not just our ideas, but our actions and our will and our lifestyle. Again, turn and follow my kingdom ways. And as Jesus does that, people have all kinds of response, both in the parable of the sower, which we're familiar with, as well as he talks about it and explains. And we see that Jesus is trying to say, look, I'm going to teach in parables. There's these paradoxical realities that are going to cause people to puzzle out what is going on. What is my kingdom like? And what is this King Jesus like? What I want to highlight in this, as Jesus explains this, and as Jesus continues to teach in parables, but also that his life in a way is a parable, because there's a paradox to how he operates. That when we look at what Jesus' kingdom is about, it's not about land, it's not about power, but what is it about? It's about hearing the word and producing fruit. That's what's highlighted at the end as being positive. That's very different from the kingdom question that we're seeing unfolding in Europe. There it's who's in charge, who has the power, who has the control to tell people what to do. Here Jesus is saying the kingdom is about hearing the word and it producing fruit in your life. You see, as people listened to Jesus, they were also confused by this idea of what his kingdom was like. Earlier on in chapter 3, they accuse him of being in kind of connection with Satan in all of his good works. And Jesus says, that's impossible. How can a house divided against itself stand? What he's saying, Jesus, is that I'm here to tie up the strong man in order for a new way of living, a new kingdom reality to come to bear. And he's saying, I'm not interested in Rome and throwing off the impression of Rome. And I'm not interested in Russia and throwing off that oppression. I'm interested at a different level. I'm interested at the evil that lurks behind those powers and those regimes. And I'm going to free you from those things. So when we read about the parables and the kingdom, we realize that Jesus is putting himself up in contrast to the ideas of our day and of the people's day back then about what kingdom is like. Now, it's important that we recognize that Jesus understood this and said there's going to be people who do and do not understand. The parables themselves demand response. And how people respond indicates how they're going to move in relation to God's kingdom come. Which is good to know, because that means as well that there's a range of fruitfulness within us. And that's interesting. So what is God's kingdom like? What is Jesus saying? It's where his word is heard and acted upon. It's those who do his will that are part of his kingdom come. And his will is to do fruitful things. Here's the homework that I want for you to do. As we ask the question of, are we believing and trusting in Jesus, and are we walking in his ways? Galatians 5 talks about the fruit of the Spirit. That's where we see fruitfulness most clearly described. A love and joy and peace and patience. I want you this week to do two things as you think about trusting in Jesus and being in his kingdom ways that are different than the world. One is to reflect on those characteristics and see if you notice them in somebody else in our church family. And then, if so, point that out to them. Express a point of appreciation. Thanks. I see your joy. I see your love. I see your patience. And I want to point it out that I see God's kingdom at work in you. And 2, I want you to ask somebody. As a body, we're meant to be integrated with each other. So I want you to ask someone that you know to say, can you help me to know, do you see God's Spirit at work in me in fruitful ways? Is God's kingdom at work? Where do you see it? And that way we can get at this question of, how are we hearing Jesus' invitation to his kingdom? I look forward to hearing about your discussion. Peace.